in Europe, routing a few $100,000 through a shell company in the Caribbean. And then it finally lands in a Southeast Asian account.
Right. And on paper, it all looks perfectly normal.
Exactly. The paperwork says it's for like agricultural fertilizer. But in reality, that money is purchasing chemical precursors for a terror cell. And the only thing standing between that transaction clearing and a, catastrophic real-world event isn't a team of armed guards or a steel vault.
No, it's usually just a person at a desk.
Yeah, it's a compliance officer staring at a digital ledger, just trying to find the one anomaly in a sea of billions of data points. Have you ever wondered what kind of mind it takes to actually build the invisible shield protecting the global economy?
It's a massive job.
Yeah,
I mean, it requires a perspective that most of us we simply do not possess. Most people interact with finance on a purely linear level.
yeah,
You earn money, you spend money.
right. Money in, money out.
Exactly. But when you are tasked with intercepting illicit finance on a global scale, you have to understand money as a fluid dynamic. You have to see how it changes shape, how it hides in plain sight, and how it exploits the seams between different international laws.
And that is exactly the core of our deep dive today. We are exploring the professional DNA of a financial crime fighter to really understand how this invisible war is actually fought. Today, we're looking at the 22-year career of Ibrahim Bello. He is the current chief compliance officer at First Bank and its subsidiaries.
Yes, and we're also pulling from his specific insights on a topic he speaks about, which is understanding money laundering and terrorist financing. What you need to know.
Right. We're using his career roadmap to sort of decode the mechanics of modern financial defense. So, if you want to know how the global banking system roots out bad actors, we have to start by looking at how a chief compliance officer is built from the ground up. Because, you don't just wake up one day and start hunting terror financing.
You certainly don't start out doing that on day one. Ibrahim brings over 22 years of experience in the banking industry to the table, with a full decade of that dedicated specifically to leading compliance.
A whole decade just at the helm of it.
Yeah. And the foundation of that expertise is a very deliberate educational split. He holds a bachelor's degree in accounting from Amadou Bello University in Zaria, and that's paired with an MBA in business administration and management from the University of Warwick in the UK.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second because I want to focus on that specific combination. It actually highlights a massive structural friction in how corporations operate. It's kind of like a detective's toolkit, right?
How do you mean?
Well, the accounting degree, that gives him the granular forensic level. It's the microscope, the ability to pull apart a balance sheet line by line, looking for a misplaced decimal or, a suspicious vendor payment in some subsidiary's ledger.
Right, following the money.
Exactly. But then the Warwick MBA, that represents the macro level global strategy. The telescope, it's understanding how multinational corporations structure their debt or how they navigate international tax law and how supply chains span across continents.
And that dual perspective is crucial because criminal syndicates operate in the exact blind spot between those two disciplines.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, let's look at trade-based money laundering as an example. A syndicate might move dirty money by, say, over-invoicing a shipment of electronics. Now, if you are strictly an accountant, you might look at the invoice, see that the math adds up, and approve the transaction.
Because the ledger balances?
Exactly. The ledger balances perfectly. But if you have that macro business perspective from the MBA, you understand the actual market value of those electronics in that specific geopolitical region. And then you realize, wait a minute, the buyer is paying 10 times the market rate.
So the accountant sees a balanced book, but the business strategist sees a completely fraudulent business model.
Exactly. Without both of those skill sets working in tandem, the laundering goes completely undetected. I mean, the criminals rely on the fact that the people auditing the transactions often don't understand the underlying business strategy.
Right.
And conversely, the people managing the business strategy aren't looking at the granular transaction data. But Ibrahim's educational foundation bridged
all the different financial sectors is a whole other beast. And this brings us to his career trajectory, which is incredibly varied.
Yes, very broad.
Right, before taking the role of Chief Compliance Officer at First Bank, he worked across Stanbic IBTC Stockbrokers Ltd., Stanbic IBTC Pensions Manager Ltd., Citibank Nigeria, Coronation Merchant Bank, and Jay's Bank Flavik.
That spans almost the entire spectrum of financial services.
It does, but honestly, I actually have to push back on the utility of that a little bit.
Oh, why is that?
Well, if you spend a few years in pensions, a few years in equities, a stint in merchant banking, and then move to commercial banking, you kind of run the risk of being a generalist, don't you? In a world where financial crime is highly technical and algorithmic, doesn't a global bank need a specialist?
I see what you're saying.
Like, wouldn't they want someone who has spent 20 straight years mastering the exact hyper-specific loopholes of commercial banking? Doesn't jumping around leave you with technical blind spots?
That's a fair question, but it assumes criminals specialize in one single financial vehicle, which they absolutely do not.
They don't.
No, financial crime is systemic. Let's break down the mechanics of how illicit funds actually move. If a cartel wants to clean, say, $5 million, they don't just walk into a retail commercial bank branch and try to deposit cash.
Right, the monitoring software would just freeze the account instantly.
Instead, they might use something like a long-term pension structure.
Wait, how does someone launder money through a pension? I mean, that sounds incredibly slow.
It is slow, and that is exactly why it works.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a bad actor sets up a legitimate-looking front company. They take their illicit cash, declare it as revenue, and then use it to pay quote-unquote salaries to employees who are actually just accomplices.
Okay, tracking with you.
Then those accomplices funnel massive, disproportionate amounts of that salary into voluntary pension contributions.
Okay.
So now the dirty money is sitting safely inside a highly regulated, seemingly untouchable institutional investment fund.
It's just mingled in there with perfectly clean retirement money. That's wild.
Exactly. And then, years later, those accomplices request an early withdrawal. They paid a hefty early withdrawal tax penalty, which they just view as the cost of doing business, right? It's a laundering fee.
Sure, just a tax to get it clean.
And the money that comes out the other end is entirely clean, accompanied by official government tax documents proving its legitimacy.
That is so clever.
It is. And if Ibrahim had only ever worked in commercial banking, he wouldn't intimately understand the specific regulatory thresholds, the contribution limits, and the early withdrawal patterns that signify pension laundering.
I see. And I guess the same logic applies to his time at Stanbic IBTC Stockbrokers. The mechanism just changes from pensions to equities.
Exactly.
Like they wash money through coordinated, high-frequency wash trading, bouncing funds between different brokerage accounts until the origin is just completely obscured.
Right. You have to know how the vehicle operates to know how it gets hijacked.
Yeah.
But honestly, perhaps the most crucial piece of his background is his time as Chief Compliance Officer at Jay's Bank. And this is backed by his certifications as a certified Islamic specialist in risk and governance and a certified Islamic banker.
Okay, why is that one the most crucial?
Because it fundamentally alters his investigative paradigm. Islamic banking operates on a completely different set of principles than conventional Western banking.
Radically different, right? Because conventional banking is largely based on interest, borrowing money and paying a percentage on that debt. But Islamic finance strictly prohibits riba or interest.
Exactly. Instead, it relies on profit and loss sharing. And crucially, and this is the key part, asset-backed financing. Every single transaction must be tied to a tangible, real-world asset.
So under like a Murabaha contract, the bank actually buys the asset, say a piece of heavy machinery, and then sells it to the client at a markup, paid in installments.
Yes, and that fundamental difference changes everything about how you hunt for financial crime. In a conventional Western bank, a compliance officer is primarily tracking the flow of cash. Where did the digital dollars come from and where are they going?
Just following the numbers.
Right. But in Islamic banking, you are tracking the physical asset. You have to verify that the underlying commodity actually exists, that its valuation is accurate, and that it is being traded virtually multiple times just to create the illusion of legitimate commerce.
Which is basically the ultimate defense against phantom shell companies, because you can't just move abstract numbers on a spreadsheet anymore. There has to be a real shipment of grain or a real fleet of vehicles to back it up.
Exactly. By mastering both conventional compliance at an institution like Citibank and Sharia-compliant frameworks at Jay's Bank, Ibrahim has essentially learned to operate in two completely different dimensions of finance.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
He isn't just looking for suspicious cash flows. He's looking for suspicious asset valuations and fraudulent profit sharing agreements. It provides this 360-degree view of financial risk that a pure commercial banking specialist would really never develop.
Okay, so that broad vision definitely sets the stage for what he actually does day to day. And here's where it gets really interesting. We know his mandate involved developing and implementing corporate anti-money laundering or AML programs, and also counterterrorism and proliferation programs, which we'll refer to as CFT.
Yes, the AML and CFT frameworks.
Right. He also conducts annual AML risk assessments and develops mitigation strategies against identified risks.
And those annual AML risk assessments, that is where the defensive strategy becomes highly aggressive. I think people hear risk assessment and they imagine a team of auditors with clipboards just checking off regulatory boxes.
Right, like making sure the paperwork is filed.
Exactly. But in reality, modern compliance assessments operate much more like a cybersecurity penetration test.
Like a white hat hacking operation against your own infrastructure. But wait, how does that actually work in finance? I mean, you can't just try to rob your own bank.
Well, no, you don't try to steal real money. You try to sneak synthetic data past your own defenses.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, a compliance team will create elaborate, highly realistic profiles of fake criminal syndicates. They will generate thousands of synthetic transactions, smurfing deposits just below the $10,000 reporting threshold, routing them through high-risk jurisdictions, and basically using known typologies of human trafficking networks.
And then what?
They inject this synthetic data directly into the bank's transaction monitoring software to see if the algorithms catch it.
So they're deliberately trying to break their own tripwire.
Exactly. If the software fails to flag the synthetic laundering, Ibrahim's team knows exactly where their algorithmic blind spots are, and then they write new mitigation strategies, new rules for the software to patch that vulnerability before a real criminal exploits it. It is a constant, iterative arms race.
Wow. That brings a completely different gravity to the CFT side of his duties, the counterterrorism and proliferation part. And, the word proliferation is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
It really is. The stakes here elevate from just protecting the integrity of the financial system to literally protecting international security. Proliferation financing refers specifically to the funding of weapons of mass destruction.
That's terrifying.
It is. We're talking about state-sponsored actors, sanctioned regimes, or terror cells attempting to acquire materials for nuclear, biological, or chemical weapons.
And I imagine those materials are rarely bought fully assembled on a black market. They're probably bought in pieces, disguised as legitimate industrial goods.
Exactly. This is known as dual-use goods. So, for example, a piece of high-grade steel piping could be intended for a municipal water project, or it could be a centrifuge component for uranium enrichment.
And the manufacturer might genuinely have no idea. They might believe they're selling to a civilian contractor.
Exactly. So the compliance officer's job is to analyze the financial metadata of that transaction. Who is the ultimate beneficial owner of the purchasing company? Does the shipping route make geopolitical sense? Does the financing rely on complex letters of credit designed to obscure the final destination?
Which is why his duty of liaising with regulatory authorities and law enforcement agencies is not just a formality. I mean, he isn't just handing over a report of a broken rule.
Not at all. He is providing actionable intelligence to national security apparatuses. Law enforcement agencies simply do not have the manpower to monitor the trillions of dollars moving through the global economy daily.
They'd be completely overwhelmed.
Completely. So they rely entirely on the intelligence gathered by compliance officers at institutions like First Bank. When Ibrahim's team flags a complex web of transactions tied to proliferation financing, they freeze the funds and hand that investigative thread over to intelligence agencies. They were literally the frontline scouts in a global security network.
Okay, so designing those tripwires and coordinating with intelligence agencies, that obviously requires immense technical knowledge. But executing those programs across a massive, sprawling institution like First Bank requires something else entirely. It requires thousands of employees actually executing the strategy.
Yes, a brilliant strategy in the boardroom is completely useless if the teller at a local branch ignores the warning signs.
Exactly. And this brings us to the credentials that give Ibrahim the authority to actually enforce this strategy. The source material highlights an impressive and frankly kind of overwhelming alphabet soup of qualifications.
Let's hear them.
Okay, so he holds a CAM-S certification. That's a certified anti-money laundering specialist. He is a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, the FCA. He is a fellow of the Compliance Institute of Nigeria, the FCIN. And he's a member of the Association of Chief Compliance Officers of Banks in Nigeria, a COBAN.
Right. And the CAMS certification alone is really the global gold standard in this field. Earning it requires a deep, exhaustive understanding of the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF recommendations. These are the international standards that basically dictate how countries must structure their anti-laundering laws.
But here's the critical problem with those international standards. They are incredibly dense. They're written in this high level legal and geopolitical jargon. And Ibrahim also has this massive mandate to provide compliance training programs that foster staff development and align domestic and international frameworks. So, my question is, how do you take a 200-page FATF mandate on international sanctions and translate it into a practical, actionable habit for like a junior loan officer processing a mortgage application on a Tuesday afternoon? If the frontline staff doesn't care, the whole shield fails, right?
That translation is absolutely the hardest part of the job. And it's exactly why his profile emphasizes building a strong compliance culture. Think about the friction between international directives and domestic reality.
Right.
An international framework might mandate strict monitoring of politically exposed persons' paybees, right? But in a local domestic context, identifying who actually holds informal political influence and who is just a wealthy business owner, well, that can be incredibly opaque.
Yeah, the international regulators wouldn't know that. The local staff are the only ones with that contextual knowledge.
Precisely. So Ibrahim has to design training that doesn't just mandate blind rule following. A weak compliance culture is a check the box culture.
Where they just go through the motions.
Right. An employee sees an alert, checks the paperwork, ensures the signatures are there, and clears the transaction without thinking. But a strong compliance culture, which Ibrahim is tasked with building, is an analytical culture.
Ah, I see the difference.
He has to train that junior loan officer to understand why a customer suddenly paying off a massive mortgage in cash is a red flag.
Yeah.
He has to empower them to pause the transaction, escalate it, and really trust their intuition when the underlying economics of a deal just don't make sense.
It's essentially deputizing every single employee in the bank. You aren't just an accountant or a teller anymore. You are an active node in a financial defense network.
Exactly. And that cultural shift requires immense leadership. You have to convince thousands of people who are measured on speed, efficiency, and customer service to intentionally slow down and introduce friction into the business when they spot an anomaly.
That's a tough sell.
It is. You are constantly balancing the bank's desire to generate revenue with the absolute necessity of keeping illicit funds out of the system.
Wow. You know, looking at Ibrahim Bello's professional profile through this lens completely redefines the role of a chief compliance officer for me. We started this deep dive thinking about bank security as like vaults and passwords. But the reality is that the modern shield is constructed out of forensic accounting, deep knowledge of alternative financial structures like Islamic banking, and the ability to run these algorithmic stress tests against your own institution. It is a highly offensive, proactive role.
It really is. It requires an individual who can speak the language of the cartel accountant, the international trade lawyer, the software engineer, and the local bank teller, all simultaneously. They have to synthesize all of those perspectives to find the one transaction out of a million that poses a genuine threat.
Which leaves us with a critical thought to consider as we look to the future. We've explored how Ibrahim has mastered this incredibly complex environment over the last 2 decades. But the nature of money is evolving faster today than at any point in history.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
With the rise of decentralized finance, instant cross-border crypto transactions, and the deployment of autonomous AI agents capable of moving assets at light speed, the architecture of financial crime is fundamentally changing. As the digital maze becomes infinitely more complex, how will the role of the compliance officer have to evolve in the next 10 to 20 years? Will the next generation of financial crime fighters need to be advanced software engineers and AI specialists just to keep up with the algorithms moving the dirty money?
The tools will undoubtedly have to change, there's no question there. But the foundational ability to look at a complex system, understand the underlying human motivation, and spot the anomaly, that will remain the ultimate defense.
The mechanics change, but the invisible war continues. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of financial defense. Keep asking questions, Keep looking beneath the surface of the systems you interact with every day, and we will catch you next time as we continue to decode the hidden mechanics of our world.
A routine wire transfer. Just three keystrokes in some nondescript office in Europe, routing a few $100,000 through a shell company in the Caribbean. And then it finally lands in a Southeast Asian account.
Right, and on paper, it all looks perfectly normal.
Exactly. The paperwork says it's for, like, agricultural fertilizer. But in reality, that money is purchasing chemical precursors for a terror cell. And the only thing standing between that transaction clearing and a, catastrophic real world event isn't a team of armed guards or a steel vault.
No, it's usually just a person at a desk.
Yeah, it's a compliance officer staring at a digital ledger, just trying to find the one anomaly in a sea of billions of data points. Have you ever wondered what kind of mind it takes to actually build the invisible shield protecting the global economy?
It's a massive job.
Yeah.
I mean, it requires a perspective that most of us just, well, we simply do not possess. Most people interact with finance on a purely linear level.
Yeah.
You earn money, you spend money.
Right. Money in, money out.
Exactly. But when you are tasked with intercepting illicit finance on a global scale, you have to understand money is a fluid dynamic. You have to see how it changes shape, how it hides in plain sight, and how it exploits the seams between different international laws.
And that is exactly the core of our deep dive today. We are exploring the professional DNA of a financial crime fighter to really understand how this invisible war is actually fought. Today, we're looking at the 22-year career of Ibrahim Bello. He is the current chief compliance officer at First Bank and its subsidiaries.
Yes, and we're also pulling from his specific insights on a topic he speaks about, which is understanding money laundering and terrorist financing. What you need to know.
Right. We're using his career roadmap to sort of decode the mechanics of modern financial defense. So, if you want to know how the global banking system roots out bad actors, we have to start by looking at how a chief compliance officer is built from the ground up. Because, you don't just wake up one day and start hunting terror financing.
You certainly don't start out doing that on day one. Ibrahim brings over 22 years of experience in the banking industry to the table, with a full decade of that dedicated specifically to leading compliance.
A whole decade just at the helm of it.
Yeah. And the foundation of that expertise is a very deliberate educational split. He holds a bachelor's degree in accounting from Amadou Bello University in Zaria, and that's paired with an MBA in business administration and management from the University of Warwick in the UK.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second because I want to focus on that specific combination. It actually highlights a massive structural friction in how corporations operate. It's kind of like a detective's toolkit, right?
How do you mean?
Well, the accounting degree, that gives him the granular forensic level. It's the microscope, the ability to pull apart a balance sheet line by line, looking for a misplaced decimal or, a suspicious vendor payment in some subsidiary's ledger.
Right, following the money.
Exactly. But then the Warwick MBA, that represents the macro level global strategy. The telescope, it's understanding how multinational corporations structure their debt or how they navigate international tax law and how supply chains span across continents.
And that dual perspective is crucial because criminal syndicates operate in the exact blind spot between those two disciplines.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, let's look at trade-based money laundering as an example. A syndicate might move dirty money by, say, over-invoicing a shipment of electronics. Now, if you are strictly an accountant, you might look at the invoice, see that the math adds up, and approve the transaction.
Because the ledger balances?
Exactly. The ledger balances perfectly. But if you have that macro business perspective from the MBA, you understand the actual market value of those electronics in that specific geopolitical region. And then you realize, wait a minute, the buyer is paying 10 times the market rate.
So the accountant sees a balanced book, but the business strategist sees a completely fraudulent business model.
Exactly. Without both of those skill sets working in tandem, the laundering goes completely undetected. I mean, the criminals rely on the fact that the people auditing the transactions often don't understand the underlying business strategy.
Right.
And conversely, the people managing the business strategy aren't looking at the granular transaction data. But Ibrahim's educational foundation bridges that gap. He has the forensic capability to track the specific flow of funds and the high level understanding of corporate architecture to realize when a shell company's business model makes, zero economic sense.
Wow. Okay. But knowing how to spot those discrepancies in theory is one thing. Applying it across all the different financial sectors is a whole other beast. And this brings us to his career trajectory, which is incredibly varied.
Yes, very broad.
Right, before taking the role of Chief Compliance Officer at First Bank, he worked across Stanbic IBTC Stockbrokers Ltd, Stanbic IBTC Pensions Manager Ltd, Citibank Nigeria, Coronation Merchant Bank, and Jay's Bank Clinic.
That spans almost the entire spectrum of financial services.
It does, but honestly, I actually have to push back on the utility of that a little bit.
Oh, why is that?
Well, if you spend a few years in pensions, a few years in equities, a stint in merchant banking, and then move to commercial banking, you kind of run the risk of being a generalist, don't you? In a world where financial crime is highly technical and algorithmic, doesn't a global bank need a specialist?
I see what you're saying.
Like, wouldn't they want someone who has spent 20 straight years mastering the exact hyper-specific loopholes of commercial banking? Doesn't jumping around leave you with technical blind spots?
That's a fair question, but it assumes criminals specialize in one single financial vehicle, which they absolutely do not.
They don't.
No, financial crime is systemic. Let's break down the mechanics of how illicit funds actually move. If a cartel wants to clean, say, $5 million, they don't just walk into a retail commercial bank branch and try to deposit cash.
Right, the monitoring software would just freeze the account instantly.
Instead, they might use something like a long-term pension structure.
Wait, how does someone launder money through a pension? I mean, that sounds incredibly slow.
It is slow, and that is exactly why it works.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a bad actor sets up a legitimate-looking front company. They take their illicit cash, declare it as revenue, and then use it to pay quote-unquote salaries to employees who are actually just accomplices.
Okay, tracking with you.
Then those accomplices funnel massive, disproportionate amounts of that salary into voluntary pension contributions.
Okay.
So now the dirty money is sitting safely inside a highly regulated, seemingly untouchable institutional investment fund.
It's just mingled in there with perfectly clean retirement money. That's wild.
Exactly. And then, years later, those accomplices request an early withdrawal. They paid a hefty early withdrawal tax penalty, which they just view as the cost of doing business, right? It's a laundering fee.
Sure, just a tax to get it clean.
And the money that comes out the other end is entirely clean, accompanied by official government tax documents proving its legitimacy.
That is so clever.
It is. And if Ibrahim had only ever worked in commercial banking, he wouldn't intimately understand the specific regulatory thresholds, the contribution limits, and the early withdrawal patterns that signify pension laundering.
I see. And I guess the same logic applies to his time at Stanbic IBTC Stockbrokers. The mechanism just changes from pensions to equities.
Exactly.
Like they wash money through coordinated, high-frequency wash trading, bouncing funds between different brokerage accounts until the origin is just completely obscure.
Right. You have to know how the vehicle operates to know how it gets hijacked.
Yeah.
But honestly, perhaps the most crucial piece of his background is his time as Chief Compliance Officer at Jay's Bank. And this is backed by his certifications as a certified Islamic specialist in risk and governance and a certified Islamic banker.
Okay, why is that one the most crucial?
Because it fundamentally alters his investigative paradigm. Islamic banking operates on a completely different set of principles than conventional
interest. Borrowing money and paying a percentage on that debt. But Islamic finance strictly prohibits riba or interest.
And this is the key part, asset-backed financing. Every single transaction must be tied to a tangible, real-world asset.
So Under like a Murabaha contract, the bank actually buys the asset, say a piece of heavy machinery, and then sells it to the client at a markup, paid in installments.
Yes, and that fundamental difference changes everything about how you hunt for financial crime. In a conventional Western bank, a compliance officer is primarily tracking the flow of cash. Where did the digital dollars come from and where are they going?
Just following the numbers.
Right. But in Islamic banking, you are tracking the physical asset. You have to verify that the underlying commodity actually exists, that its valuation is accurate, and that it isn't being traded virtually multiple times just to create the illusion of legitimate commerce.
Which is basically the ultimate defense against phantom shell companies, because you can't just move abstract numbers on a spreadsheet anymore. There has to be a real shipment of grain or a real fleet of vehicles to back it up.
Exactly. By mastering both conventional compliance at an institution like Citibank and Sharia compliant frameworks at Jay's Bank, Ibrahim has essentially learned to operate in two completely different dimensions of finance.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
He isn't just looking for suspicious cash flows. He's looking for suspicious asset valuations and fraudulent profit sharing agreements. It provides this 360-degree view of financial risk that a pure commercial banking specialist would really never develop.
Okay, so that broad vision definitely sets the stage for what he actually does day to day. And here's where it gets really interesting. We know his mandate involved developing and implementing corporate anti-money laundering or AML programs, and also counterterrorism and proliferation programs, which we'll refer to as CFT.
Yes, the AML and CFT frameworks.
Right. He also conducts annual AML risk assessments and develops mitigation strategies against identified risks.
And those annual AML risk assessments, that is where the defensive strategy becomes highly aggressive. I think people hear risk assessment and they imagine a team of auditors with clipboards just checking off regulatory boxes.
Right, like making sure the paperwork is filed.
Exactly. But in reality, modern compliance assessments operate much more like a cybersecurity penetration test.
Like a white hat hacking operation against your own infrastructure. But wait, how does that actually work in finance? I mean, you can't just try to rob your own bank.
Well, no, you don't try to steal real money. You try to sneak synthetic data past your own defenses.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, a compliance team will create elaborate, highly realistic profiles of fake criminal syndicates. They will generate thousands of synthetic transactions, smurfing deposits just below the $10,000 reporting threshold, routing them through high-risk jurisdictions, and basically using known typologies of human trafficking networks.
And then what?
They inject this synthetic data directly into the bank's transaction monitoring software to see if the algorithms catch it.
So they're deliberately trying to break their own tripwire.
Exactly. If the software fails to flag the
Good morning, everyone. Mhm.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Yes. So you are welcome to today's seminar. This is part of our training for the postgraduate program in the department. For those of us that are joining outside the department, you are welcome to the Department of Actuarial Science and Insurance. The department at the postgraduate level runs MSc in Actuarial Science, MSc Risk Management and Insurance, MSc Master of Risk Management, and Master of Pensions Management. As part of our monthly program, experts from the industry are invited to share their experience. So this is our effort in bringing the town and gown together. We always want to bring the practical perspective to the theory that we teach in the classroom. So today, our guest speaker is Mr. Ibrahim Bello. He is currently the Chief Compliance Officer with First Bank. He's going to be presenting on the topic Understanding Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing, what we need to know. Mr. Ibrahim has over 22 years experience across the financial sector, with over 10 years leading institutional compliance. So as the Chief Compliance Officer of First Bank, he ensures that regulatory requirements are met, and he also ensures strategic alignment. He's had various experiences from the trajectory of his work background. He has worked in Stanbic IBTC, Citibank, Nigeria, Coronation Bank, Jaiz Bank, before being appointed as the Chief Compliance Officer of First Bank. Is very, very strong in the implementation of Pillar 1, 2, 3 as specified and as required by the regulator. His background, assures and is also informed his invitation to this presentation. With his accounting background, with his expertise in Islamic finance and even in compliance, we are very sure that Mr. Ibrahim will do justice to the title as being displayed. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to warmly welcome Mr. Ibrahim Bello to today's presentation. So, Mr. Ibrahim Bello, please share your screen and you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Please confirm that you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm trying to share my screen. Okay, please confirm you can see my screen as well. I'm sharing my presentation slides.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Yeah, we can see your screen now. And we can hear you.
Thank you very much, Prof, for the introduction, and good morning, colleagues. I say colleagues because I'm also a lifelong student, reading one thing or the other, getting one certification or the other. I'm monitoring risk and compliance and continuous upskilling myself to ensure that I'm able to be more and do more for my organization, which also extends to my personal life, and some work that I do also impact on the country as well. Indeed, I'm balance officers of banks in Nigeria that participated in ensuring that we get the country out of the grey list last year when we had the FATF assessors that came to assess us. So we engaged with them, and collectively with the Central Bank, Nigeria Financial Intelligence Unit, other regulators and law enforcement were able to successfully put up a very strong defense that led to the exit of Nigeria from the grey list. And currently, we're also working on the national risk assessment, which we expect to be completed in another week or two, which is looking at all the risk that we have from money laundering, terrorist financing, proliferation financing, fraud, cybersecurity, amongst others. So I'm very excited to be here, and I'm hoping that with a few words and a few presentation slides today, I'll be able to share with you a bit of what I know. And I'm hoping that in the conversation that we would also have, I will also be able to learn from you so that I can add to my own body of knowledge as well. So thank you very much. Today, we're going to be speaking on understanding money laundering and terrorist financing. I chose this topic because the bulk of Nigerians are not very familiar with it. Certainly, if you work in financial services or non-bank financial services, you would have heard about these topics. But it's very important that the generality of Nigerians know about it because it's a menace that we're dealing with as a country. And once you're dealing with this menace, you will then see that the progress of the country will be slow. There will be a lot of instability. There will be economic challenges, to mention a few. So the more that we know of it, the more that we understand our responsibilities, the more that we're able to do for ourselves, to protect our institution and our families, and by extension, ensuring that we have a better country. So in the course of my conversation, I'll be speaking on these items on the screen: regulatory guidelines, the money laundering, terrorist financing and proliferation financing, due diligence measures, a bit of case study, and then wrap up, and then we can ask a few questions. So I'll start with regulatory outlook. So in the course of dealing with money laundering, terrorist financing, menace in Nigeria and globally, one of the major requirements is for you to have laws in place. It is said that in a country where there is no rules, there is no offenses. So we needed to have Money Laundering Prohibition Act, Terrorist Prevention Act, and a few other regulations to ensure that we're able to criminalize some type of offenses that leads to money laundering, terrorist financing, proliferation financing, and I'll explain what they mean subsequently. So that once you have those laws in place, you will now have institutions that would help institutions from the financial services or other sectors in the economy, or institutions within the government, especially law enforcement. So we'll speak to this as we go along. But these are the regulations.
Will you eat it?
And
you go and finish your plantain first. When you finish your plantain, I'll give you egg.
Can you mute your mic, please? Thank you. So some of these regulations give birth to other guidelines. Some of these regulations give birth to other guidelines that I'll be speaking to. But the overarching regulation with respect to money laundering and terrorist financing are these two regulations: the Money Laundering Prohibition and Prevention Act, which will continue to update, the Terrorist Prevention and Prohibition Act, which will also continue to update as we go along. And I'll pick some aspects of it to speak to them in the course of my presentation. The next slide is talking about the law enforcement agency who is responsible for implementing those laws. It can be institutions in the private sector or government agencies that would ensure that everybody comply with them. We're all familiar with tax laws. Nigeria Revenue Service is tasked with the responsibility of driving that process to ensure that the tax laws are obeyed. Of course, they also work with other agencies, but the primary agencies that we have for fighting the menace of commission, which a lot of us will be familiar with, in that we've seen a lot of cases in the media, in the news around what EFCC is doing. We also have Independent Corrupt Practices Commission that focuses on public sector officials and ensure that the trust that we've given to them to hold those offices, they're able to live up to it and ensure that they deal with public funds diligently. Also have the Nigerian Drug Law Enforcement Agency, who and terrorist financing cases, and that responsibility was now splitted. They now focus on drug-related offenses. And then we have Nigerian Police Force, who's responsible for ensuring that there's peace and security in the state. A lot of us will have really understand the ramifications of what it means. So I'll explain a bit. Now, what I have on the screen is really talking about definitions, but I'll try and make it as granular as possible so that we understand what it means. And I'll use what we call the predicate offenses. And prior to now, some decades ago, there were a kingpin in the US, I think in Chicago, who was into all sorts of nefarious activities, drug-related offenses,
Hello,
child
Mr. Brown.
trafficking. Yes.
Hello, sir. So please,
Yes.
you can use the presentation mode so that the slides can be seen, and then you have not been strolling. So that
Okay.
so I can appreciate
It's actually on presentation mode, but let me take it off and put it back again.
Yeah, yes, sir. Thank you.
Can you see it on presentation mode now?
Not yet.
Please confirm if you can see it on. I have it on full screen on my side.
Oh,
Yes, it's fine now. Thanks.
okay, it's fine now. Okay.
We can see it, but you can expand this a little bit.
Okay. Do you need me to go back, or I should just continue?
No, just continue. Just continue.
Just continue.
Okay. Thank you.
Scrolling
Apologies,
down
I
so
didn't know
we
that
can
you
see
weren't
the
seeing it
pages as
very
we're
well.
talking. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I
thank
want
you
to
very
see the
much.
slides, please.
So, yes, I'm just talking about this particular one now, talking about the definitions. What we have here there's a body called Financial Action Task Force. It's a body that came together after the September 2011 terrorist attack. That they then said that, look, let's come together as countries, started with the G8, and other countries now joined, and virtually almost all the countries in the world part of Financial Action Task Force. They came together to say, how do we stop the scourge of terrorist finance? Hence, they came up with recommendations, legally binding on all the countries that are members of FATF. Although they are not legally binding, if any country does not implement those recommendations, it will lead to a situation where they will say that country is not cooperating with global efforts to fight the scourge of money laundering and terrorist financing. And there are a lot of recommendations, 40 now, and they do what is called mutual evaluation. Mutual evaluation means that they will come to Nigeria and they would assess Nigeria based on those 40 recommendations. And they will rate the country on each recommendation, whether you are largely compliant, you are compliant, you are not compliant. If you have many instances of not compliant, put on a gray list or a blacklist. A gray list means that the country has some exceptions that they'll be given some time between 1 and 2 years to remediate for them to get back to the compliance list. A blacklist means that the country is far away from implementing those recommendations, which then means that if they blacklist you, most of the countries in FATF will now not be doing business with you. It will be difficult for you to get foreign facilities. It will be difficult for citizens to get visas. Certainly, the MasterCards or the ATM cards that that country has will not be working in other countries. It will be very difficult for you to do trade between those two countries. Those are some of the implications. Now, this FATF came up with 40 recommendations that is broken down into a tripod. The first aspect is that the legal framework within that country must be such that it criminalizes money laundering and terrorist financing. Hence, we have the Money Laundering Prohibition Act, we have the Terrorist Prevention and Prohibition Act. It means that because we have those acts, we are seen to be moving towards compliance. Certainly, they will then look at the effectiveness of those acts. The second part of the tripod is that regulators will now take this act, regulators, especially in financial services or non-bank financial services, will now take this act and distill it into regulations for their members to adopt. Hence, for banks, the CBN has what is called the CBN AML CFT regulations, which is taken from the Act. Because if you look at the Act, as a normal citizen in the country, you might not be able to implement. If you look at the Act as an institution in the country, you might not be able to implement. So, for example, the Act will talk about umbrella statements. To make umbrella statements, there shall be no money laundering in Nigeria, for example. Now, if you take that as an institution, you'll say, what does this mean? How do I even implement? But a central bank will take it to say, for there not to be money laundering, every bank account must have bank verification number for identifying the ultimate beneficial owners of that account, and so on and so forth. The third part of the tripod is that once the act has been enacted by the assembly and signed off into law, the regulators have taken that act and distilled it into regulations for operators to implement. The operators will now do policies and procedures. They would hire, can we mute the person whose mic is on, please? The operators will now do what we call policies and procedures to ensure that we comply to those rules and regulations. So it is these three tripod that the FATF comes to review to determine whether the country is on a green list, on a gray list, or on a black list. And for that to happen, before they even come, the country is expected, because the first recommendation is risk assessment. That's why we must come together as various sectors within the economy to sit down with various parts of government to do a risk assessment of Nigeria. In that risk assessment, we'll look at all of our states. Which state has more terrorism? What are the risk factors? Who are the operators? How do they fund those terrorist activities? What are the mitigants that we need to put in place as a country to ensure that these things do not happen again? And so on and so forth. We document that in what is called a national risk assessment document. And then that policy document is now taken by operators to now do their own entity risk assessment. So if I get that document for my bank, I will then take it and start to look at what did the government say is happening in Sokoto in terms of risk, or in Maiduguri, or any country that is a border country to another country. They will say in that document that if you have anything to do with that country, be mindful that there is easy flow of human beings between those two countries. So you must be aware of the risk of having people move. It means that when people are moving between those two countries, they'll be moving monies, right? You want to be sure that the monies that they are moving are legitimate money. Monies will be coming in. As they are coming in, you want to also trace the source of the monies, amongst others. So this is how the FATF has done recommendations. Now, going back to the other story that I was telling. So in the US at that time, this criminal gang that was into money laundering, terrorist financing, sex trafficking, child trafficking, they were making so much money in cash that they needed to find a way to introduce the money into the banking system. What they thought of was now to open laundromats across the city of Chicago as at that time, such that if they then take cash to the bank and the bank officers are asking them, why do you have so much cash? What business are you doing to generate the cash? They will tell them, don't you see our laundromat all over the city? People are coming to wash clothes, iron clothes, and that's where we're getting the cash from. And that way, if you are not very well briefed, you are not well trained as a bank staff, you will just take their explanation and then deposit that money into the bank for them, which was what was happening. They had so much power, they were into bribery and corruption. And at some point, the law enforcement guys apprehended them and took them to court. When they got to court, it was very difficult for the court to prosecute them because there was no law criminalizing the activities that they were doing as of that time. So there was nothing to hinge a court pronouncement on. Now, after a lot of arguments, the prosecuting lawyers now said, dear judge, let's even agree that all the monies that these people have made is legitimate. They should show us evidence that they have paid tax on these monies. Luckily, as of that time, there was a very strong tax law that's criminalizing tax evasion, such that if you are caught, all the benefits that you have derived from that process will be taken by the government. And that was how they were able to bring down this criminal organization. Then they now sat down to say, there must be an act that criminalizes all of these things that is happening. Hence, the word money laundering came about. And countries now started understanding the risk and documenting a number of those things that needs to be documented to be able to criminalize this item. Now, in terms of definition, what money laundering means is that is the processing of proceeds of criminal funds to disguise them, to make them appear legal. If anybody does that, that person is involved in money laundering. You will understand more when I start. The key words here is that the ultimate objective is to make dirty money clean and use it for legitimate purposes. And I'll explain more in the subsequent slides. Now, this slide is just talking about the online criminal activity that generates proceeds of or income, which when laundered results in offense of money laundering is called the money laundering predicate offenses. Now, for you to now say that somebody has committed money laundering is an umbrella word, right? If you remember with the story that I was talking about, that criminal gang was into a lot of things: child trafficking, kidnapping, bribery, extortion. Hence, the regulations now came up with this list of criminal activities that are predicate offenses that qualify for a money laundering prosecution. So you see, participating in organizing crime, terrorists and terrorist financing, trafficking in human beings, and migrant smuggling, sexual exploitation, including sexual exploitation of children, illicit trafficking in stolen and other goods, corruption and bribery, fraud, counterfeiting, including cybercrime now, with what we're dealing with in terms of technology, environmental crime, which we've seen even in Nigeria, murder, grievous bodily harm, kidnapping, and all this list are things that you can be prosecuted for. Hence, when you see it goes to court against somebody, you will hear things. It's because they have found that when they look at the regulation, the person has perpetrated multiple of these offenses. Hence, each offense has its own either jail term or penalty. So they need to count all the offenses so that they can get the maximum possible penalty to ensure that it serves as a deterrent to that person's story. Now, in the placement, layering, and integration, it doesn't mean that you must have done these 3 stages before you can be accused or prosecuted for money laundering. Money laundering can be prosecuted at any stage. And using the case of the criminal gang in the States, you will notice that when they brought cash into the banking system through the laundromat, they had done what is called placement. And what is placement? Placement is the physical introduction of illegal or illicit funds into the banking system. So if I am a minister of the Federal Republic, I was able to find a way to reduce the cost of, so for example, a Minister of Works, the government has given a contract for a contractor to do Third Mainland Bridge. The contractor has been paid on the understanding that the minister had behind to the contractor that, look, once we pay this money, because I'm ensuring that you get this contract, you must give me $1 million in cash. Once the money is paid, they give the minister $1 million. the minister then finds a way to introduce it into the banking system to credit his domiciliary account for onward wiring to his offshore account. Once that money comes into the banking system, what that minister has successfully done is to do placement. He has introduced illicit money into the banking system. Now, once that is done, it then moves to the next stage, which is the layering stage. And in this stage, what they are trying to do is to separate the criminal proceeds from its origin. Now, in this case of a minister, if he introduces $1 million, he sends this $1 million to his account in maybe Switzerland, in Mauritius, in British Virgin Island, right? He has sent them out for onward transaction later. He sends them out and waits maybe for 6 months, 1 year, right? And then it goes to integration stage. He now introduces those monies back into Nigeria to say, oh, Dangote is doing private placement for Dangote refinery. I have monies offshore and I've moved money, $500,000 from my Swiss bank account to my Nigeria bank account for my bank to help me buy Dangote private placement shares. That's integration, because at integration stage, the person is now appearing as a sophisticated investor, somebody that is knowledgeable. They are buying real estate, they are buying stocks and shares, right? They are buying artwork from the proceeds of crime that they have placed, they have layered, and they have integrated into the system. Now, it is easier to catch money laundering from the placement stage with just one simple question. What is the source of the monies that you are bringing to the bank? What do you even do so that I can match what you do versus the money that you are bringing to me? If you're a student who is under 21, that your parents are still sponsoring you, paying your school fees, accommodation, and all of that, and you have a bank account, and you are moving $500,000 in cash to put in your bank account, the officer in the bank is expected to ask you, what is the source of this money? He's supposed to review, what is your status? What is your income? Can your income accommodate this money? If the answer is no, then that officer will automatically know that this is proceeds of crime. If you then say that, oh, my dad is a billionaire, once in a while, at the end of every year, he gives all his children Christmas gifts. This year, he has given me 500,000, right? We would ask, who is your dad? So that we can also check, what does that person do? Can that father really afford this amount of money? There are some people that you know that they can afford. Other people, you are not very sure. So when you then investigate that and you see that it does not make sense, you are bound to file a suspicious transaction to the regulators, who can then invite that person to say, what is this money for? And we'll see it, and I'll speak to it subsequently. Now, this diagram is just talking about the money laundering cycle, which I've also described, where dirty money is introduced into the banking system, right? And then from the banking system, the person does a lot of transfers to just separate the origin of that fund from the money. Gets to integration stage, where they start to buy sophisticated things, real estate, art, private jets, stocks and shares, bonds, and they look like a sophisticated investor. At that point, it's very difficult to catch a money launderer, because when you now start to look at, they have a lot of companies that they have built using all these illegal proceeds. So if, for example, they introduce the money at placement stage to Bank A, at integration stage, they move the money away from Bank A to open an account in Bank B. When they get to Bank B will open an account for them, because the money that is coming to them is being transferred from another bank in Nigeria to them, right? The kind of due diligence that they will do will be different from if it comes in cash and that bank is the first beneficiary of that cash. Now imagine that you move the money from Bank A to Bank B, right? In Bank B, he transferred the money to open an account, right? From Bank B, he then sends the money to buy stocks and shares, right? When he buys stocks and shares, He goes to Bank C, opens an account. And then when he sells those stocks, right, he tells a stockbroker to credit his account in Bank C. Now, when Bank C opens account for that person, maybe the person deposits 5,000 naira by transfer from another bank. The next thing that person, the bank will see is that money is coming from a stockbroking company. And the narration is saying sales of XYZ bank shares. You see, Bank C will assume that this person has been buying shares over time. And because the money is also coming from a regulated company, right? They would also assume that stockbroking business will have done KYC on this person. Hence, when it comes to them, they still do their KYC, but it's more difficult for them to understand that this person had stolen money 10, 15, 20 years ago, and he has been layering them, and now is at the third stage where he's now appearing as a sophisticated investor. Now, we'll talk about terrorist financing. Terrorism financing has become very key to us in Nigeria, as we have been seeing all sorts of terrorist activities, kidnapping, ransom, amongst others. But for definition, terrorist financing involves the use of cash, right, to perpetrate terrorism activities. That's what terrorism financing in summary is. Now, the difference between terrorism financing and money laundering is that for a money launderer, the objective is for them to acquire wealth, right? Every money launderer wants to acquire wealth, wants to acquire assets. But a terrorism financier is not acquiring any wealth. He just wants to sponsor a terrorist activity for a particular reason. Either is a religious person and says that, what that person is doing, according to my religion, they must be dealt with. Or that person is trying to compel somebody to do something or to refrain from doing something. Or that person is trying to compel a government to do something or refrain from doing something. And I'll give you examples. And this one is quite a funny example, but it's very, very instrumental for us to know the extent of the coverage of what can be called terrorism. There was a case some years ago that was in the news, I think it was in America, where a gentleman called an airline and said that this particular plane that they have that is due to take off in a few minutes, that there's a bomb on that plane. And because of that scare, the airline ensured that that plane did not take off. They evacuated everybody in the plane. They got bomb experts to search the plane thoroughly, but they did not find any bomb. So they went back and called this individual and said, you reported that there was a bomb on this particular flight. We have checked and we did not see any bomb. He said, no, that there is no bomb on the plane. They said, so why did you report that there was a plane? He said, his girlfriend is supposed to be on the flight and she was running late and he needed to ensure that the plane does not take off before she gets to the airport. He was arrested and prosecuted for terrorism. Even though he did not introduce cash, he was prosecuted for terrorism because part of the definition for terrorism is the threat of bodily harm to somebody. Hence, if an armed robber comes to meet somebody and says, give me your money, and they put a gun to that person's head or a knife to that person's head, because you have threatened the life of that person in the course of extorting money from that person, apart from the one count charge on armed robbery, you would also face another count charge on terrorism because you have terrorized and inflicted fear in that person to compel them to act in a certain way that you want. There are many instances of state-sponsored terrorism where some states would actually sponsor terrorists to go and bomb another state to say, oh, you are holding our prisoners, you must release them. Hence, if you don't release them, we'll sponsor people to come and bombard you and all sorts of things. So we need to be very careful with the definition of terrorism. When you threaten someone openly or even quietly, and the person is able to get evidence that you are threatening their life with a weapon, you can be charged for terrorism. Now, terrorist financing, like I said, is not only sponsored through legitimate funds, right? There can also be illicit funds for terrorism. So in the case of Boko Haram, when they're doing terrorism, part of how they finance it is to, they do kidnapping, they ask for ransom. The ransom that they get, they use it to buy weapons. The ransom that they get, they use it to buy IEDs, explosive, to be able to conduct the next terrorist activity, right? Now, the legitimate sources include, and instances, we need to be very, very careful of this. We are very religious people in this country. I'm a Muslim. And some people then come and say that they are doing Islamic outreach, and I should support that cause with money. Because it is a soft part of my life, I want to support them because I genuinely believe that they are doing Islamic outreach or Christian outreach. Let me support them, since even now I'm struggling to pray 5 times daily. Maybe God will use that to forgive me my sins. So you want to do that. Although it is fine, but you have to be careful who you are giving monies to. The moment you transfer money to those people's accounts, there is a trail. You have left a trail. If those people now happen not to be genuine religious people, but they are terrorists that are disguising to source for funds from people that they know are sympathetic to the religious cause, you will now find out that when law enforcement apprehends them, a typical thing that they do is that they get all their bank account number and BVN and generate all their statements. They now see that you transferred 5,000 naira into their account. You would explain and explain and explain to try and extricate yourself from any relationship whatsoever with those persons. So we need to be very, very careful. It is good to do religious things, but you will find out that a lot of these people go to all of these religious bodies to try and look for soft targets where they will get funds from to do some of the things that they do. Now, this slide is now talking about the various stages in terrorist financing. The first one is collection of funds. I've talked about donations, right? They use charity organizations. Some NGOs that says that this is what they are doing. By the time you go and find out underneath, they are doing something different. I think the chief of army staff once said that terrorism in Nigeria also has sponsorship, and NGOs are also involved. So you will see that NGOs, there can be 2-phase, 3-phase NGOs that we need to be careful about. So when you are sponsoring NGOs, please be sure that you actually know what they are using those monies for. Process of crime, we've talked about kidnapping, some of them do armed robbery, and so on and so forth. We've talked about state-sponsored funds as well. This stage 2, or the second one, is store of funds. They use bank accounts. There were some conversation some years ago, I don't know if this is still the case as of today, where some money launderers and terrorist financiers were opening bank accounts for internally displaced people. So they go there, they tell them they want to open accounts for them so that they can be sending them money periodically for their upkeep. They get all their data, complete the account opening form, snap their picture, and then open bank accounts, get them to sign up for ATM cards, but they never see the ATM cards, even though the people that have helped them to open those accounts would have collected those ATM cards and then use it for all sorts of nefarious activities. Bulk cash warehousing. A number of these terrorist people, they look for cash when they get cash because they don't want to be traced. They might not want to use bank accounts. They now start storing cash. That's where you will see in some instances, they busted the house. There's a lot of cash in there. The cash could be for money laundering. It could also be for terrorist financing. We've talked about art. If somebody wants to commit terrorist financing, in another country, and the person does not want to leave a trail, right? It means that the person does not want to do transfer from one bank to the other, right? The person can buy art and move it across border, get to the other side and sell it. Sell it and then again get monies that they use for nefarious activities. Because if you're, especially when you're doing in the Western world, their society is very close-knit. They can trace you, they know where you live because of the social security systems, amongst others. And of course, cryptocurrencies, we've heard instances where kidnappers are saying that they want to be paid in cryptos. So we need to be also mindful of that. The third part is similar to the second part, which is how money is being moved. Money is moved through bank, money is moved by cash, especially in neighboring countries. You see people just enter the car, they put money, put it in some part of the car and cover it, and then they drive the car into the neighboring country and then remove the money from the part of the car that they've hidden it, amongst others. Like I said, in the case of Boko Haram, at some point they said that they were into fish business, right? Because in that area of the country, fish business is big business. So they use that as a commodity to use to get funds when they sell those fish to do their activities. The use of funds, there are many ways that they use these funds, right? They use it for training, they use it for media. Media could be YouTube videos that they do to send out to ensure that people are aware that they exist, to claim responsibility for terrorist financing, so terrorist activity. There is purchase of weapons. When they get these funds, they use them to buy, like I said, explosive devices, weapons, and so on and so forth, and for planning and preparation. So these are some of the stages in terrorist financing. Now, proliferation financing. In recent times, proliferation financing has come to the fore, right? And what is proliferation financing talking about? Is providing money, access, equipment for large-scale production of weapons of mass destruction, right? And there are typologies for this as well that we need to be very, very careful of, right? So for example, if you're a bank and you're doing trade business, when somebody says that they are importing or exporting goods, you want to track, apart from collecting documents that you do sanction screenings for, you want to track this ship that they claim is coming from Dubai to Tinkan Island. Is it a direct movement from Dubai to Tinkan Island? Oftentimes, you will see, because a ship is usually very big, there are many containers for different destinations along the route of that ship. The ship that left Dubai can stop in any other country before it gets to Tinkan Island. So if you're a bank and you are processing that transaction and you are screening the movement of that ship, you want to check that that ship did not touch any sanctioned country, any country that is at war, because the country that is at war will need weapons, right? And when you are loading things onto a ship, you can say you are importing furniture, but under that container, you can easily load it with weapons. So where a bank then sees that a ship of export or import is passing through a sanctioned country or a country that is at war, more questions will be asked to satisfy that due diligence has been done and that these items of import are not really fake in a way that they will just document something and what they're actually shipping is something else. So it's very, very important that we pay attention to that. Red flag and indicator. Now, what is a red flag? A red flag is not saying that something is definitely wrong. It is just saying that these are the areas that shows the risk of something being wrong that we need to pay attention to. So if you look at somebody with activities that is inconsistent with that customer's known business, you want to check it. If somebody comes to open an account and says that, oh, I am a farmer, and we start seeing transaction in that customer's account that appears to be an oil and gas type of transaction, we'll call the customer to say, this is what we know of you. Explain to us the source of these monies, the beneficiary of these monies, and the purpose of this transaction, so that we can determine whether we still know this customer or not. If what he explains is not in line with their business and no justifiable reason for that transaction, we would have to file suspicious transaction for law enforcement to quickly sweep in and ensure that if he's doing something nefarious, they're able to apprehend that customer. Now, there may be an instance where a farmer is doing oil and gas activity periodically. And when we go to that customer to say, okay, you're a farmer, how are you paying for oil and gas? You say, yes, I'm a farmer. My farm is 300 hectares of land. And I have various tractor equipment and all of that, to which I cannot move them to filling station to buy fuel. Hence, I have to pay for a truck of fuel, for instance. And I do that once every 3 months because all my tractors will consume one truck of fuel in 3 months. And then we check and we see that he's been consistent such as that. We send our officers to go and visit this farm. They go to visit this farm, they see this truck, they see that this truck that brings fuel comes to load. There is a depot in quotes there. So we'll say, okay, this one is legitimate, and then we'll then upgrade that person's profile. Yes, please. Please let me know when I'm running out of time so that I can speed up. There's wire transfer to Bank Secrecy Evans. If we see a customer that is based in Nigeria, he does business in Nigeria, but every time he's wiring monies from the account to Secrecy Evans, British Virgin Island, Mauritius, Cayman Island, one day we'll call him and say, okay, your business is in Nigeria. Your staff is in Nigeria. Why are you always sending money to these countries? Who are these people that you're sending money to? Of course, we will have sanction screened them before we start engaging that person. Although this is a red flag, we would expect that it gives us plausible reasons for us to believe that he's doing genuine activities. I won't run through all of them. I'll just pick a few that I can quickly drive home. When a customer who provides incomplete or suspicious information, we want to also check that that customer is genuine. There have been a lot of news around a government agency that opened bank account, and we're not sure that that's government agency for which that bank account was opened is genuine, right? It means that the banks that would have opened that account should have asked those questions to say, who is giving you the authority to open this account? The document that has been presented should have been verified. So if a company comes to my bank to say, I want to open my account, they give me incorporation documents. I'll collect it and say thank you, but I'll go to CAC to go and verify that that company actually exists. Otherwise, these are suspicious activities and we will not open accounts for such type of customers. Now here we're talking about offenses of money laundering and terrorist financing. Of course, the first part is when you are guilty of conversion of illicit properties or funds for the purpose of concealing and disguising the true source. You'll have been guilty of money laundering, and there are a lot of sanctions for it in the regulation, which includes financial sanctions and jail terms. Tipping off is a very big offense, and a lot of people might not know when they tip off. When you hear that somebody is being investigated by law enforcement, you want to be very, very careful what you discuss with that person, so that you are not divulging information that you know that will then make that person to evade arrest. So you want to be very, very careful. As bankers, you will find out that sometimes when there is an investigation on a customer's account, we are not able to tell that customer so that we are not guilty of being tipped off. But you will then see instances where the police is investigating, EFC is investigating. They will then tell us that if this customer comes to you, please freeze that customer's account and tell the customer to come and see us. There are instances where the law enforcement have been looking for that customer. They will then partner with the financial institution to say, they will quickly apprehend this person, and so on and so forth. Failure to report. This is a case of, for some of us that travel, If you go to the airport, you always hear announcements. If you see something, say something. It protects you, it protects everybody around you, and indeed it protects us as a country. If you see somebody doing something illegal, you want to find a way to quickly report that person so that law enforcement can apprehend that person. If you see somebody that is about to, maybe you're on a plane and you hear some people having conversations on how they will detonate some explosive device when they land, you have to find a way to report, even if it's to the captain of that plane, to say, look, or somebody is having this conversation. You want to quickly check so that it does not lead to a situation where a bomb will go off. Assistance. Sometimes you have to be very, very careful when you are assisting somebody in doing things. And one easy example that comes to mind, especially for a lot of younger students that are not very familiar with some of the implications of some of the things that they do. Somebody comes to meet you and say, Ibrahim, I want to receive some money from my uncle, but I have an issue with my account, and the bank said I should come and update my BVN or AIN. I've done so. They say it will take 7 working days for it to be activated, but I need this money now. Can I ask my uncle to transfer it into your bank account? Once they do, then you help me withdraw it. Don't worry, I'll give you 5% of the money. It's a very innocent, maybe it's your best friend that is telling you. It's a very innocent request. It looks very innocent. You then say, okay, no problem now. To be what together. You are also looking at the percentage that you get. The moment that money touches your account, and that money is proceeds of money laundering or terrorist financing, EFCC starts to investigate. They will follow the money everywhere it goes. You will be invited. You will be asked questions like, this money that touched your account, what is the money for? Who is giving you this money? What's the relationship between you and this person? Are you aware that this person committed this offense? How did you assist this person in committing that offense? Amongst others, that's when sweat will break out and you start wondering. By the time you now say, is this my best friend that said I should collect on his behalf? He will completely deny you because he doesn't want to be arrested. Mind you, when that money hits your account, he did not ask you to subsequently transfer to him. He will either say, okay, let me transfer it to Wale, Obinna, and Umoru. You have helped him to transfer those money. They will pack all those people and you will explain your relationship with some of these people as you have transferred money to them. And the person that says that is the owner of the money has already collected cash that has no trail. There is no evidence that you gave him cash. He has already gone. So when they invite him, you say, why are you inviting me here? Did I do any transaction with this person? Are you aware that this person, yes, I know him. We are colleagues in school. He's my friend, but I did not do any transaction with him. Can you see anything in my bank account that suggests that? And that person will walk free. So we need to be very, very careful. The same way with the financial institution. The moment you don't do the due diligence that you're supposed to do, and an account has been opened, that account has been used to perpetrate fraud, terrorist financing, or money laundering, and you cannot demonstrate as a bank that you have done adequate due diligence, law enforcement will say that the bank connived with that individual or entity to commit those offenses. So we need to be very careful when we are assisting people. More on penalties. When there are offenses committed against the money laundering or terrorist financing, the regulation is saying that there will be conviction, and sometimes the penalty can be 4 years imprisonment to life. Life, certainly for terrorist-related activity. In sometimes they will say, okay, all the monies that you have made from this fraud or from this money laundering, the government will collect it. Hence, you will hear things in the news that the court is saying that this person must forfeit all of these assets because they've realized that those assets are proceeds of crime. You forfeit it to the government, and so on and so forth. So we need to be very, very careful. These laws are there, and the government will use it when there are issues. We need to pay attention to the people that we do businesses with. We need to find a way, even if it's on Google, if you don't have sanction screening system, you want to do business with somebody, just put that person's name on Google. And there's a string that we usually use. You put Ibrahim Bello plus terrorism plus money laundering plus crime plus corruption, and you click search. If there is any hit on that individual, either on corruption, on crime, on money laundering, on fraud, Google will bring it out so that you can read. And then you begin to ask that person question. I saw this news on you. What is it about? You know, and so on and so forth. If a person doesn't give you a convincing answer, it is better for you not to do business with them. It is better for you not to allow transaction flow between your accounts. Because if that person is investigated, typical of law enforcement investigation, they will ask all the banks in Nigeria to provide the bank statement of that individual or that entity. So before you even get to EFCC, they already have your statement in the banking industry, all the accounts that you thought that, oh, I've not used this account for like 20 years. It is nowhere, they won't touch it. The bank will report it. So you can't really hide. They will ask you about all those transactions. And for personal practice, when you're doing transaction, please try and put narration. It's very important. Because if somebody were to call you today to say, you sent 50,000 naira someday 10 years ago to somebody, what's the money for? You can't remember. But if you put some small narration, even if it's gift to that person, you say gift, right? If it's you bought salaram, you say salaram. So that way, if it is ever called to question, you don't need any magic to remember what it is. You can easily tell from the small narration that you have put in place. Now we moved into due diligence measures. Today, if you're opening bank account, the bank will ask you for identity documents. And these are some of the identity documents that we ask for. International passports, driver's license, voter's card, NIMSI slip, amongst others. And when we get these documents, we go to verify it on the issuing body's website. So if we get NIMSI slip, we go to NIMSI website to put in your number and to generate a report that will show your passport, you know, that will confirm what you are giving us that you are genuine. We have had instances where some people give us these documents and they are fake. It will not generate any hit. We don't open accounts for them. Now, if we extend that further, what the regulation is also saying is that your documents, the way you have arranged your name should match. You will find out that people use a lot of abbreviations, especially for BVN and NIN purpose. What the regulation is saying is that once we see those anomalies, we should tell the individual to go back and correct them. These are all government efforts to ensure that the database that we have of Nigerians is accurate and is consistent. So we need to be mindful of that. Now, there are other documents that we'll collect apart from this. So for example, we would ask for proof of address so that we can now conduct address verification to know where you live, right? It's part of the due diligence process such that when there are issues, we can find you, right? And issues doesn't necessarily mean that you have committed a crime. It may be that we have seen transaction on your account that we believe did not originate from you. Maybe somebody is trying to defraud you. We want to be able to reach you quickly to protect your funds in the bank. Another thing, I've talked about BVN, right? Amongst other, if you are a company, we're supposed to do verifications with the CAC to ensure that that company exists and there are no issues. Those are part of the due diligence process. And as part of the regulation, we are required to unveil what we call the ultimate beneficial owner, which is the natural person that owns 5% and above of the shares of that entity. So if you open an entity, you register a company called SYZ Limited, and you have, it is you, your wife, and your maybe 3 children. You have allocated 200,000 shares to everybody at 1 naira each. Everybody pays to 200,000. It means that we would KYC everybody on that company. But if it's a family company, you as the father, you own, say, 950,000 shares. The remaining 50,000 you distribute it between your wife and your children. You are the ultimate beneficial owner because you own the bulk of the shares, and all the other people, none of them has up to 5%. So we won't bother with those people, but we will focus on you to ensure, because you are the mind of that entity that controls the entity. Address verification is very, very key. So please, by all means, when you give your address, it's very important that you ensure that it can be verified. Otherwise, when a bank cannot verify your address, at some point in time, when they've tried to reach you, they will close that account because you don't want to do business with somebody that you cannot find. The fact that an address verification failed is a condition to file a suspicious transaction or to close that account. Politically exposed persons. I believe we've heard a lot about politically exposed persons. These are individuals that have been entrusted with public office, that have access to public funds. The regulation expects us to rate them as high risk and pay attention to the transactions that they do. And as a matter of fact, report those transactions on a monthly basis to the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit. Now, the definition of PEP includes heads of states, right? The president, ministers, governors, deputy governors, House of Rep members, senators, kings, queens, and their children, their relatives, right? Amongst others. So that in some instances, you'll find out that a senator may not steal public funds using his own name. He might use his son's account, his wife's account, his cousin's account, and so on and so forth. To the extent that we know the relationship that exists is a family relationship, we want to also flag those people as politically exposed persons so that when we are looking at the account of a senator and we know that a senator has a son, a daughter, a cousin, we must also check that person's account and report it. Now, as part of the KYC for these government officials, we ask them, what is the source of wealth that you are bringing into this account, right? If a senator says the source of wealth is a sitting allowance, we have a fair idea of what the sitting allowance is. So if in any month we see him bringing 100 million, we know that one is not sitting allowance for the month. We would then have to ask him questions. Senator, sir, we are aware that this money is above the sitting allowance that you told us you'll be using the account for. What is this money for? Right? Now, although it's a red flag, we will know if it's actually a criminal activity when he then responds to us. He might tell us that, oh, I'm not just a senator. Before I became a senator, I've been an MD of a bank. This was my average salary over the last 10 years that I've been an MD of a bank prior to being a senator. And those funds I have invested in bonds and shares. It is the sale of this process of the sale of these shares or these bonds that I've brought into the account. And you can see from the narration that it was paid by my stockbroker and so on and so forth. And then we can verify those things and then we let it go. But where they cannot give us a convincing explanation, right, we are bound to file suspicious transaction to the NFIU to do further checks. Now, I'm just looking at my time. Reporting requirements. In the regulation today, and it's been so for many, many years, we are required as members of financial services to report transaction of any individual that does 5 million and above, or any corporate that does 10 million and above in any transaction, not per day, any transaction, any single transaction, or their equivalent in foreign currencies. Maybe the person did it in dollars, in pounds, in yen, or whatever the currency is. We are bound to report it to NFIU. So a lot of people are not aware, but the regulation also says that if you walk into any bank branch, they must have that notice that says that we are bound to make this currency transaction report and foreign transaction report to the regulators. What we have now seen is that me, that I'm a genuine person, if I have 5 million naira to transfer or 6 million naira to transfer, because I can tell you where the money came from and is legitimate, I will have no issues transferring in bulk. But somebody that has stolen money and the person knows that, this bank now, if I go and do transaction of 5 million, they will go and be reporting me to regulators. The person will decide to do 4.9 million, 4.8 million, 4.5 million. When we see those patterns, they are suspicious patterns, right? Which means that that person is desperately trying to avoid being reported. Because we have now known that, we will still report that person. Now, not under CTR and FTR, we will report that person other suspicious transaction, which I would explain subsequently. Now, with suspicious transaction, what the regulation is saying is that if any transaction does not follow the pattern of the account holder, or that the transaction does not make business sense, right? Or that the customer is unable or unwilling to provide information or documents relating to that transaction, we are compelled to file suspicious transaction reports to the regulator. And these are some of the possible scenarios. The list is longer than this. If the transaction does not make any economic sense, so for example, I have money in my account, right? If I do a particular transaction in a certain way, I will not incur charges. But I am choosing to do transaction in a way that I would incur the most charges. A bank would ask question, are you aware that you can do this transaction in a cheaper way? And that person now says, no, please, I don't mind. Even though it's expensive, I can afford it. Just go and do my transaction and continue to do it in that way. I don't mind paying those. It might be that that person is trying to avoid reporting, because we don't know anybody that will be happy to pay more for a transaction when they can pay significantly less. So we have to also look at it, what's really going on. Is that money that that person is moving out, is it truly his money? Because if it's truly your money, you want to protect the most of it as much as possible. And there's a very short timeline within which we must report suspicious transaction. So when a bank is asking you a question around some transactions that you have done, please, by all means, try and answer very quickly so that that report does not end up with the law enforcement, who then may invite you to ask you questions around those transactions. Okay, case study, we're almost at the end. This is a very short case study. It's talking about where somebody opens an account as a student who is 22 years old, and it gives us valid passport. The purpose of the account is for daily educational related expenses. The initial amount in the account is small, and then by the time we saw subsequently, when that person is doing transaction, the person is doing unusual volumes, moving monies in large amounts to different jurisdiction, different branches, which suggests that a student should not be busy doing a lot of activities in such huge amounts, right? Because ab initio, what he told us is that daily use educational expenses, which we would assume to be buying of handouts, paying for food, paying for transportation to and fro the campus if they live outside of the campus. Now, what that meant is that the financial institution will then move into what we call enhanced due diligence. Now, we've talked about normal due diligence. Enhanced due diligence is a situation where you are seeing red flags in the behavior of a customer or the account of a customer. It means that you must do more than you would do for a normal customer to check that what that customer is doing is not illegal activity. Hence, we call it enhanced due diligence. Because you have seen the pattern that does not correspond with the pattern of a student account, you now start to ask more questions. You request for documentation for some of those transactions. You request for inflows. What are the documents for the inflows? So if you say that you're a student, you are getting $10,000, what is the money for? Who gave you that money? We'll start asking all of those questions, which may be intrusive, right? And we always tell the customer, when we're asking you questions, if you don't want to answer us, it's fine, right? But we will not tell you that we will file suspicious transaction. But if you don't want to answer us, we will document it as such that we ask the customer is unwilling to provide information. Hence, we're also filing suspicious transaction. But we must recognize the patterns, right, to know the suspicious activity. Hence, the bank staff will be trained on how to recognize suspicious transactions. So these are just a very short case. And then in wrapping up, this is a call to action. And there are a number of things that we need to look out for. Like I said, if you see something, say something. There are, for financial institutions, the regulation also compels us to have what we call whistleblowing policy. So even when you find out that your account officer is doing illegal activity, by all means, you can report that account officer to the bank using the whistleblowing channels that are independent. So that the bank can investigate, and if that person is found culpable, the person will follow the disciplinary process that leads to termination or prosecution, and then we'll send the name of that staff to central bank, and central bank will blacklist that staff in the banking industry. That person can never work in the banking industry again. We're also talking about participating in voting. When you see that the government is debating a particular policy, by all means, please, let's read them. Social reform policies, they impact on our lives as Nigerians. Let's read them, let's give them comments, because they are human beings like us. They don't have all the answers. If you read and you see something, by all means, send the comments so that they can implement the best act or policies that will be good for us as citizens and for our country. Abide by all rules to ensure that we are a good member of the society. Yes, some of the regulations that we have, we don't have adequate enforcement, but with time, some of these things are getting enforced, and we need to be very, very careful. When somebody is coming to tell you that, if you give me 50 naira, in 1 month, I'll make it 500 naira, be careful. If it was so easy to make money and be rich, everybody would have been rich. It is not easy at all in any country, in any jurisdiction to make money. So if somebody is promising you a get-rich-quick scheme, you have to be careful. It may be a Ponzi scheme, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Yes, some people will get paid, right? But after a while, the capacity to pay people will be diminished. And we've had a number of such schemes, Spetco, MMM, and all sorts of things. It's very difficult to make money, right? And making money takes time. Anybody that is telling you it's quick, you have to be very wary. Volunteering, civic responsibility and activities that help to make the society better, teaching young people the value of helping others, and most importantly, teaching young people the values and the implications of not obeying the law. A lot of our young people today have get-rich-quick mentality. It is our responsibility that we continue to caution and train them. Otherwise, they believe that, look, Davido is a multi-billionaire. Once I sing one song, I will blow, I'll become a multi-billionaire. They forget that Davido, Wizkid, and Burna Boy have been on that journey for more than a decade. It is when the thing is now paying heavily that they now think that they just made the money overnight. Hard work is always pay. Hard work and smart work. So we need to inculcate that in our young ones to ensure that we're able to hand over to them a better society that will impact on all of us, and we'll look back and we'll be better for it. I think this will be my closing thoughts, some of which I have really spoken to. Some people rationalize cost benefits when it comes to complying with Money Laundering Act. And I'll give you an example. Let's use the case of a best friend asking another friend to help them receive money. In some instances, the best friend will know that that money is proceeds of illicit activity. But the person will rationalize it that, look, I have this problem that I need to solve. My mother is ill. Once I get this money, I'll just use to solve that problem. Last, EFCC would harass me. They will lock me up for some short period of time, and I'll move. We've had people that will say that, as a matter of fact, it's in the news. Somebody got credited mistakenly $1 million. The person said, I'd rather go to jail than to pay back that money. And it's naivety, because if that person knows how banking system work, you can't keep that money. The only way you can keep it is that you withdraw that money in cash and you go and hide it somewhere that nobody will ever see it. Hopefully, hoping that you go to jail for 7 years, and when you come back, you have access to that money and you can use. Hopefully, you will still be alive. But to the extent that that money is in a bank account, part of the investigation process is that law enforcement will ask all banks in Nigeria to provide your bank statements, to freeze all the amount in those accounts. And by the time the thing goes through court, with court order, they'll be able to have access to that money. So the cost benefit analysis that person has done will be weak and will be detrimental to that person. Everybody is doing it, does not make it right. I always say that haram is haram, even if the entire world is doing it. It does not make it right. What is wrong is wrong. A lot of people, especially young ones, they rationalize doing something wrong, right? I'm not the only one smoking. All my friends are smoking. You know, you have to be very, very careful with doing things. Tarnishing our good name and public trust by negligence and bad reputation. Sometimes when you see something and you don't say something, the implication comes back to haunt you. And I'll give you an example. In a bank that I've worked previously some years ago, one of the bank staff was stealing customers' money. His colleagues that sit beside him, they were aware, but they kept quiet. One of them, he sent money to that person to help him open a barbering salon, amongst others. When the bank noticed very quickly, we invited the person for a meeting. While he came for that meeting, there were already police people on standby. Immediately he came for the meeting, we got him arrested, and we transferred him with a petition to EFCC. When EFCC started investigating, they came to the bank and they asked, take me to where that person sits. We took that person, the EFCC, to where the person sits. Who sits beside him? Who sits in this room? They packed everybody in that room for investigation. And although they let a number of them go who had no knowledge of what this guy was doing, but the interview process was so gruesome that when they came back, some of them were asking for some days vacation to just go and rest and relieve themselves of the trauma of the questioning styles, amongst others. So if you see something, please say something. You might think it might not affect you, it might affect somebody else that you know. So it's very, very important. We need to consciously think about tomorrow's consequences of our actions today, and our actions or inactions today as it relates to poor business conduct may haunt us many years, even after retirement. This will be the end of my presentation, and I hope that I've been able to share some part of my knowledge with you, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, 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 very much, Mr. Ibrahim. Now we know what money laundering is and what terrorism financing is. The floor is open now for questions, comments, and suggestions. I will still leave it to you. We'll be calling them one after the other. So you have 15 minutes, to administer that. So the floor is still open to you, Mr. Ibrahim.
Okay. Yes. I'm trying to go to see how the hands are raised so that I can call them in sequence. Okay, so I would stop sharing now. Okay, so I can see Mr. Mobolaji Ogunbi. Apologies, I'm just calling as I'm seeing the hands raised. Please go ahead, sir. Mobolaji Ogunbi, please go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon or good morning, sir. Sorry. I think that might be a mistake.
Hello.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Somebody else.
Please go ahead. I can hear you.
Okay, so good morning, sir. My name is Mobolaji Ogunbi.
Okay.
Oh, so I'm a lady, not a man.
Yes, apologies for that.
So, firstly, I just want to say thank you for the whole session. It was really insightful. I mean, I've attended quite a number of anti-money laundering lectures, but I mean, we really broke it down for a layman to understand. And I'm so grateful for that. So, I think it is more like a question or a statement. Or there was a time you gave an example whereby you said you used like two friends saying that it was just an innocent, gesture like, oh, my uncle wants to send you money or my bank has issues. Can you just only receive the money and all? So I just want to understand. So regardless that it's a one-time thing, ESSA will still have to, invite this friend who received the money on behalf of his friend. Or like they have to be like a chain or like a sequence that, oh, okay, we're receiving money from this person like every month, or even if it's a one-time thing. So like I just want to understand like that process. That regardless of a one-time thing, or they have to follow like a pattern before they invite that person.
Okay. Thank you very much. I can answer that very quickly. You see, you don't need multiple transactions to be guilty of money laundering. Once the money that comes to that account is proceeds of crime, even if it's 1 naira, that person will be called to answer questions. Right? Now, it may well be that you receive such money multiple times, but the person on whose behalf that you have received that money has never been found out to be guilty of any crime. So that person has never been investigated. I will say that you are very, very lucky to have received those money. But the moment that person is a subject of investigation, especially by the EFCC, the typical standpoint is to get the person's phone number, the person's address, and the person's bank verification number. With the BVN number, they will send it to all banks in Nigeria to provide all statements relating to that person. If that person's BVN is found to be in a company account, that company's account would also be provided to EFCC. So to the extent that that transaction in that person's account is proceeds of crime, that person will be called to answer difficult questions. Even when it is not proceeds of crime, but the person that you receive money from is being investigated for money laundering, right? And they see that that person sends money to you. To the extent that that person cannot explain that, oh, this is my brother, I'm just giving my brother pocket money, right? Or that if that money is significant enough to be subject of investigation, they will call you to ask questions. Now, the truth is that they also are intelligent enough to know an innocent person when they are engaging with you, right? They will also request for your statement and they will see the pattern of monies in your account. So they can deduce that this person is innocent and is only just being used. And I've had a case like that in the previous bank that I worked. One of our staff received this kind of monies and transferred to other people. The police wrote the bank to release that staff for investigation, right? And by the time the staff came to me that I'm being investigated, and we sat down and we discussed what has happened, I told her what she did wrong, right? And also assisted her and the police to apprehend the person. But that process was lengthy, and there are many times that they invited her, which is also not good for her. So it's not a one-time or a multiple transaction. So long as that transaction is proceeds of crime, that person can easily get called. Thank you. Mr. Dare Ademola, please.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for your time. So I think my own question is relating to how people use others' identity theft. And this often come in real life in subtle ways, right? And I think you alluded to one of them is when people go into, when they were creating accounts for people's in IDPs and using it for layering and then keeping money. So I'm saying, I think one of the regulation was to do liveness check. But as of today, and you mentioned that the country is working on a risk assessment of stuff like this, right? As of today, what can we do where people can be sensitized enough to know, especially NIN being very important in our banking life or identity life in Nigeria? What is the best way to curb this and reduce the impact that it has on people that are either far away from city centers, that have NIN or that, let me say, not eligible enough to know the impact of releasing this information for evil actors to use and then come into the banking sector? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's a very, very good question. And I can tell you that if you ask an American or a Briton to release their social security number, they will never release it because they know that that social security number carries information about their life and somebody can steal their identity. Now, there are a lot of sensitization that is being done by financial institutions where if you log onto your website, the bank's website or the bank's mobile app, please don't just rush to go and do transaction. When you see pop-up, please try and read it so that you will be informed of what the bank perceives to be a risk in the course of doing your transaction by yourself so that you can protect yourself. And don't just keep that information. My family, we have a WhatsApp group. Once I hear something or I know something, I type it to everybody to be aware. Now, in terms of modus operandi of people that steal identity, oftentimes Nigerians give information out freely. We don't give information on a need-to-know basis. So you go to a party, you meet your friend, they ask you, where are you coming from? Oh, I'm coming from my friend Tolu's house in Ojuelegba. I've come to this party. When I leave here, I'm going to meet Uche in this place, right? Or that I was at the hospital. What's wrong with you? The doctor said I had malaria. Have you taken chloroquine? Have you? So information that is not necessary, please don't share it with people because you'll be innocently sharing information with somebody else that is harnessing information that they can use against you. So if you want to use ATM, for example, and you get to the ATM, it is not properly, there's no proper light there, right? Please don't use it. Because we've seen over time instances where these syndicates, they compromise an ATM where they can get your card details. In 2008, 2009, the central bank compelled banks to move from magnetic stripe cards to pin and chip. If you look at your ATM card now, it has a small pin and chip, which is a more protected form of card than what it used to be in 2008 and prior to that, where it's just magnetic stripe. A magnetic stripe, if you remove that stripe and put it on another card, you can read some of the information. People send emails. People send some type of sensitive or sensational emails where they say, we do not have your information. If you don't update us on this your information, we will shut down your bank account. Please, when you click on that email, don't click on that link. Because when you click on the link, right, you will find that it is a suspicious link that will ask you more information that can lead to identity theft. You will see your bank will always send you, we will never ask you this type of question, that type of question. If you call your bank to complain and they're asking you about your card details, they will never ask you for your full card number, right? They will ask you for the last 6 digits of your card. That's enough to get your identity on our banking system. So identity theft happens more from the information that we divulge to others or to emails. If you go to some countries and you are using your internet to browse certain sites, you will just get a prompt that will block your entire screen to say that this site that you have browsed in Dubai or in Qatar is an illegal site and you have been fined X amount of money. If you don't pay this amount of money, you'll be detained and all that. Out of that fear, you'll go and click, you provide your card details to the wrong sets of hands. So it's about vigilance, right? A lot of banks are sending this information to account holders. Please read them. When you read them, please also inform others, especially your family members, because if your family member gets defrauded, one way or the other, you will contribute to make them stand on their feet again. So regulators also do a lot of this sensitization amongst others. And if you are in an organization, you can also tell your organization, the HR, to help call some of these knowledgeable people to talk to people once in a while about certain topics such as this. Thank you. Tosin Odebode, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. So my question is around balancing AML CFT controls with business particularly, right? With business objective, especially around CBN circulars that tend to strengthen all these AML CFT controls so that we have much safer environment and all of that. However, the downside of it, sometimes some of this have an effect on the business. So in your experience, how have you been able to implement these controls and also balance with demand of business? Because sometimes we find ourselves in between these two. The business wants these numbers, and some of these controls, when you implement, it affects the numbers, sort of. So how do you, move around this?
Okay, thank you very much. And very good question. And indeed, this is part of the things that I do and people in my position also do with banks. The cost of compliance is increasing, right? And we tend to see organizations, especially in financial services, increasing their spend on compliance, cybersecurity, and all of that. Because if you don't, your system will not be foolproof, right? So that spend continues to go up. But the way that we do it to balance it with business objective, the first thing that we do is that business or that institution must define its risk appetite, right? And I don't know any bank in Nigeria today, and I'm speaking about banks because I work in the bank, that doesn't have zero tolerance for regulatory infractions. That's usually the language. And when there is a sanction, you would explain all the way to the board. What do you then do? You tell the business, when you are conceptualizing your products and services, please involve what we call the control functions. The control function is compliance, internal control, risk management, internal audit, so that we can sit down and design products with controls in place that meet the business objective. Business objective cannot override regulation. So in some instances where regulation says, don't do this, if the business wants to do it, we'll say don't, because regulations have said don't. They give us banking license. If you do, they'll take your banking license. So don't do it. However, for you to be able to meet your business objective, if there are many options for you to be able to do a certain business within the ambit of the regulation, we will look at the least costly option on the one hand, the most customer-friendly option, because if it's not customer-friendly, your customers will rather go to other institutions that will make it easy for them. So that's how we analyze our cost-benefit analysis for those businesses. And unfortunately, despite those analyses, there will be some that you would have wanted to do, but you cannot do because of regulation. Hence, you have to leave them. If you must then do them, you will now go and sit down with the regulators to say, this issue that you say we should not touch. And at some point, if you remember, central bank says, don't deal in cryptocurrency, right? Don't settle transactions in cryptocurrency. But they have come up with what we call the virtual asset service providers regulation now. But at that time, if you wanted to do it, you have to go and sit down with the central bank to say, yes, we are aware of this regulation that says we shouldn't do this, but we have mitigants in place that will mitigate the risk that you are thinking about. Can you review our offering and our mitigant and give us what we call no objection to be able to do this particular business or transaction in a certain way that conforms with what we have agreed with you as the mitigant that will ensure that those risks does not crystallize. So these are the options that we take. It's easier said, but in getting that done, it's a lot of processes and conversations. You must demonstrate as a financial institution that you know what you're doing and that you are thinking of risk the same way the regulator is thinking of risk, and that you're able to document it. And once in a while, when they give you those no objection, they will come back to test it. You must be able to ensure that it is auditable. Thank you. Mr. Olakunle Patrick, please.
Yeah, good morning, sir. I just want to know, for finance houses that do not use CASA, most of them deal with loan products and they don't really have access to current account and savings account. So basically, when we deal with clients like that, and there are some of these clients that we are actually required to get a SCUMO certificate from. That is the certificate against money laundering and all that. So maybe at the point where we begin the transaction, we got the certificate and we're able to trace no transaction to money laundering. But then, and at the end of the day, maybe the client was now arrested before the expiration of the loan transaction. Are we covered with such kind of a SCUMO certificate that we have with us at that point and not being able to trace any transaction on his bank statement to money laundering? Are we really covered with the collection of the SCUMO certificate at that point, sir?
Okay, thank you very much. And very good question. Oftentimes, once you have done very good due diligence that you can evidence, you will typically not have issues with a law enforcement officer, because your due diligence that you have done will now serve as information that they can use to prosecute a case. Collecting SCUMO certificates is necessary because you need to understand that that person has registered with SCUMO, because they belong to a pool of entities that fall under the designated non-business and professionals, right? So you need to collect that certificate, but it does not take away from the requirement for you to monitor the transactions on that account. And I hear you when you say you have given out loan, which is one transaction, right? You have given out loan to this person, and all you are saying in terms of transaction is the monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, annual pay down against those loans. However, as those monies come in to pay down on those loans, it is your responsibility as an entity to ensure that the source of those monies are from what you know to be that customer's profile. The day the customer that tells you that I'm looking for, the person says that I am a sole proprietor, I sell handmade shoes, and I need loan of 5 million naira. You give them loan of 5 million naira, and in documentation of that loan, they've told you that on a monthly basis, their monthly income is 50,000 naira. And it is the reason why they're taking that 5 million loan for 10 years, so that they can be paying you 20,000 naira per month. All of a sudden, you now see a 1 million naira inflow. You must ask questions. And where you find that to be suspicious, because when you relate it to the business that they do, they don't have 1 million inflow and they cannot justify it, you are expected to file suspicious transaction. A suspicious transaction does not say that you know that that person is guilty. It is just that this is a red flag that does not match the customer's profile, that you are compelled to file with the regulator. Once you've done that and they subsequently pick that that customer is doing nefarious activities, they will look at the STRs that you file, they look at your due diligence, and they will not find any issues with you. I hope I've been able to cover that. Mr. Ubochi Andrew.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, facilitator. We appreciate your insights in this presentation, understanding money laundering and terrorism financing. My question really has to do more with the PEP part of the presentation. In Nigeria, we have a lot of issues around those who are, in charge of our commonwealth. And unfortunately, a lot of times we're not even aware of what they earn. And like I said, we're not just focusing on they who are on the seats, also focusing on their wives, their children, their relatives, and all of that. But in spite of the searchlight on these guys, a lot of money still goes out of the country, out of the government coffers, and there seems to be no trace, perhaps until when they leave office. Question is, if the banking sector, has that level of network on all banks, how come these guys are still able to do what they do, suspiciously now? And they get away with it until something happens, maybe when another government comes, and then they now start digging up the files and find out, you have taken so many trillions and billions. So how tight is the banking sector in that area of, monitoring these people such that they see do what they do and then nobody holds them, especially while they are still in office? That's my question.
Okay, thank you. Very good question. Unfortunately, the legal process in Nigeria takes a lot of time. And our responsibility as members of financial services is to report transactions. And in some instances, when we become very uncomfortable, to close accounts, right? Once you report a suspicious transaction, it is expected that the next agency that you report to, which is the intelligence, NFI, Nigerian Financial Intelligence, will collect that intelligence and send it off to the prosecuting agencies for money laundering, which is the EFCC. The EFCC, when you speak to them, they'll tell you that they have thousands of investigations ongoing, right? And more being added to it, and they have thousands of cases in court. And if you follow the news, you see a lot of adjournment in court cases, amongst other things. So I think that as a country, we need to do more on the legal side, right? To ensure that we are able to expedite the prosecution time, right? Than to have adjournments. Some cases have been adjourned and they run into years. The person sometimes would have even died and the case has not been concluded. So I think for us as financial institutions is to render suspicious transaction. The agencies of government then takes that information and distill it to the prosecuting agencies, who then goes into the court. This frustration, we also express it as members of financial services, because now we are asking them that, look, give us feedback on the use of the suspicious transaction that we render, right? Which they have now started to give us feedback to say, these are good suspicious transactions. As of yesterday, when I went for a meeting, on Thursday actually, when I went for a meeting with some of these agencies, they gave an example of a case that was reported by a bank as suspicious transaction that they were able to convert to prosecutions. So it's not a one quick fix. It's fixing of our entire system that we're able to convert STRs to intelligence that the EFCC can use, or the IPC can use, or the police can use to prosecute, and for the court to have more judges, or maybe dedicated judges, that are prosecuting AML cases only, as opposed to judges that will prosecute AML, CFT, that will prosecute political case, and so on and so forth. This is some of the issues that we're having to deal with that leads to these instances where, although suspicious transactions have been reported, but we've not seen that the person upon which that report has been done has actually been prosecuted. Unfortunately, I don't have all the solutions, but I can speak to my own part with respect to finding suspicious transactions. Ayo,
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, good morning, and thank you very much. Thank you very much, and I've been enjoying this topic. It's really very interesting. Something came to mind which I would like to ask you to help us shed a bit of light on it. In today's day and age, when we have fintechs, their rapid growth. I mean, many of us are benefiting from what fintech is being able to do. But when you compare with what has been in the norm with the regular banking that we all grew up with. But with the rapid growth that we see with fintech, and our topic now
Yes, sorry, sir. Because everyone in the medical sector has.
Sorry, can you hear me? Sorry, can you still hear me?
I can hear you, but we
Can you
need
still
the
hear me?
person speaking to mute. I can hear
Okay.
you.
Okay, so
Please go
sorry.
ahead.
So let me just round up. So the KYC friction that we need, KYC is important any which way. How is it being balanced? Especially when we look at enterprise risk appetite that many of these fintechs is expected to have, but then conflicting with their goal of actually having rapid growth. So how is how do we how is this balanced? So that's basically what my question is.
Okay, thank you very much. You know that our responsibility doesn't stop when we do very good due diligence. It's one part of our responsibility. The next part is to now do good monitoring and good reporting. Now, all of these three processes, you must always match with your risk appetite as an institution, which is that there will be institutions that will say that this type of fintech I will not onboard because of the risk that they portend, right? Some institutions will say that for me to onboard a fintech, if I'm a financial services entity that has regulatory license from CBN, from SEC, from NICOM, or from PENCOM, or any of these financial services related regulators, I must make sure that whichever fintech that I'm onboarding that will be doing transactions for themselves or on behalf of others, I must make sure that they also have registration with any of these regulators. A lot of these fintechs have registration with CBN, either as payment terminal service providers. Some of them now have microfinance bank license and so on and so forth. The implication of saying that you want to reduce your risk to a particular niche in the fintech world is that you have analyzed that niche, you understand the business, you understand their policies and procedures, you understand the risk, and you have documented it, and you are able to onboard them. But despite all of these activities, once you onboard them, some of these fintechs, they will tell you a fantastic story. We're only going to do ABC business once you onboard us. The moment you onboard them, you see them doing A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. That's where monitoring is extremely crucial. Such that if you now do monitoring and you expect or you see that the additional thing that they are doing that they did not tell you at the point of onboarding, you must now do risk assessment for them to be comfortable with them. Otherwise, you simply ask them to come and close their account. One of the biggest issues with fintech is KYC. A lot of them do transaction with all and sundry. And once you ask for KYC, they don't have it. So you want to sit down and talk to them about who are your clients? How do you KYC your clients? Can you share with me your AML-CFT policy that will speak to how you KYC your clients so that I can review? Because if you latch on to me, I must be able to say that I have reviewed your governance structure, your monitoring and systems that I'm comfortable with. Where I am not comfortable in at any point in the life of this relationship that we have, I will shut down your account. Because oftentimes you will now see that they transfer some of this risk to you that is a regulated entity. So you want to be careful. Monitoring is very key. And sometimes you must get attestations where they will commit to say, this is the limit of the things I will do with you. Should we want to do anything more, we will come back to you before we're able to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Michael Tolu Akinwale. Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
My name is Michael Tulokwe Akinwale. So I have a question, and this thing goes. I'm a digital asset trader. I buy and sell digital currency online.
No.
Okay.
So sometimes ago, somebody reached out to me from China that he wanted to do a transaction worth over to 6 billion naira. I was afraid initially, and the reason being that I was afraid of that transaction. And I asked him to say, "Oh, can you test, run few amount of money and all those things, like 5 million and 10 million naira, for me to detect if the money is actually real or is a fraudulent transaction?" At that processing, when I was questioning the guy, interrogating him, where is the source, the money coming from, and all those things, he sent the money, sent the 5 million naira actually, but he used third payment platform. But at the end of the day, I was afraid because he used third payment platform like Paystack and all those things. So the money came through Paystack. To call the issue, I lose that transaction. So my question is there a way a bank can detect a fraudulent transaction instantly? Because somebody like me who sells and digital asset online, we do with fast transaction, and you have to release crypto or whatever it is that you are selling to that person instantly. But I have a couple of experience whereby my friends, they've been invited by the EFCC and somebody from China. How are you going to find that person? So is there a way the bank can detect all those American banks? Because when they send a fraudulent transaction, they'll be able to detect instantly, oh, this money is a fraudulent money, why this money is actually a claim money.
Okay.
Is there any system?
Thank you very much.
Because I still have something I have one money pending in my UB account, and you see the process of this thing has been since last year. Money has still been there. You can't just tie money down. So is there a place, or is there a system put in place to detect fraudulent transaction?
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, there are systems. Yes, please.
This will be the last question we can entertain, because they have lecture from 12.
Yes, I can see we're almost at 12. So, Michael, there are fraud monitoring systems. And very recently, if you look at my, and I'm hoping that I can share these slides. If you look at the page where I talked about regulation, the first one there is the most recent regulation by CBN that talks about baseline standard for automated monitoring solutions, part of which the fraud monitoring solution is captured there. They give us up to September next year to ensure that we upgrade these systems. So a fraud monitoring solution detects transactions and sends alerts to the bank to investigate. It does not say that this money is fraudulent. It just says that you need to look at this money in case it is fraudulent. That's why you get this alert. And there are what we call scenarios that we set that allows those alerts to be generated. But for a foreign entity, you have to be very, very careful. Sometimes I always say you have to balance the pain of losing a transaction with the joy of being able to sleep at home with your family without issues. It's very, very important for you to always think about that. A genuine business, if you ask them for information, they'll be willing to talk to you. They will be willing to provide documentation. They'll be able to give you their address, right? And so on and so forth, for you to be able to verify. You also ask them, who are the people that you are currently doing business with? So for me, if I'm meeting any of those entities, I'll say, who are the people in Nigeria that are doing business with? Can you give me a list so that I can reach out to them and find out what has the relationship been from a compliance perspective? And when we do that, we find out that it is not, obtainable. For some of these transactions that people are doing into Nigeria, they are transactions that are covered by a regulation. So you ask them, where is the regulatory license for you to be able to do this particular business that you are doing? If they can't provide it, that means they are doing it under the radar, which means that it could swing either way, for which you need to be careful. So you ask them, what registration do they have in their country? They should give you a copy of the registration, because if you are doing financial services anywhere in the world, you must be registered with somebody. They must be able to provide it. Then if they are doing business in Nigeria, they must be able to show you if they are registered in Nigeria. If they are not, right, what are the parties that they are doing business with, so that you can compare to say what exactly are the things that they are doing that you need to watch out for. Compliance is non-competitive, so we are able to engage ourselves in that perspective. Then when you are not comfortable, you report the transaction. Crypto, in that same meeting that I was talking about, somebody asked the NFIU that, is it only banks that will be reporting suspicious transaction? Can we not report suspicious crypto transaction? They are also making it available on the NFIU Go portal that you can register with, so that you can also file suspicious transaction on crypto transactions. So that way, if any of those transactions ever comes under investigation, you can demonstrate that you have filed that. I've been able to respond to your questions. I'll leave my contact so that you can reach out to me if you have additional clarifications so that we can engage further. Thank you very much to
Thank you, sir.
you all for listening, and thank you, Prof.
Yes.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ibrahim. Mr. Toby, please, can you do the vote of thanks on behalf of the students?
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, sir. So please, on behalf of the HOD, Professor Adeleke, the lecturers and students of the Department of Actuarial Science and Insurance at the University of Lagos, we'd like to appreciate you, Mr. Ibrahim Bello, for taking our time to have this insightful session with us. Thank you once again, sir. Thank
you so much. I appreciate you all. Thank you very much.
So on that note, we declare this session closed. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank